a WikiVidi Documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. Tea. Tea is an aromatic beverage commonly prepared by pouring hot or boiling water over cured leaves of the Camellia sinensis, an evergreen shrub native to Asia. After water. It is the most widely consumed drink in the world. There are many different types of tea. Some, like Darjeeling and Chinese greens, have a cooling, slightly bitter, and astringent flavor, while others have vastly different profiles that include sweet, nutty, floral or grassy notes. Tea originated in southwest China, where it was used as a medicinal drink. It was popularized as a recreational drink during the Chinese Tang dynasty, and tea drinking spread to other East Asian countries. Portuguese priests and merchants introduced it to Europe during the 16th century. During the 17th century, drinking tea became fashionable among Britons, who started large-scale production and commercialization of the plant in India to bypass the Chinese monopoly. Combined, China and India supplied 62% of the world's tea in 2016. The term herbal tea refers to drinks not made from Camellia sinensis, infusions of fruit, leaves, or other parts of the plant, such as steeps of rosehip, chamomile, or rooibos. These are sometimes called tisanes or herbal infusions to prevent confusion with tea made from the tea plant. Etymology. The Chinese character for tea is originally written with an extra stroke as, and acquired its current form during the Tang dynasty. The word is pronounced differently in the different varieties of Chinese, such as cha in Mandarin, zhou and joy in Wu Chinese, and ta and te in Min Chinese. One suggestion is that the different pronunciations may have arisen from the different words for tea in ancient China. For example, tu may have given rise to te. Historical phonologists however argued that the cha, te and jaw all arose from the same root with a reconstructed pronunciation dra, which changed due to sound shift through the centuries. There were other ancient words for tea, though Ming is the only other one still in common use. It has been proposed that the Chinese words for tea, tu, cha and Ming, may have been borrowed from the Austroasiatic languages of people who inhabited southwest China. Cha, for example, may have been derived from an archaic Austroasiatic root la, meaning leaf. Most Chinese languages, such as Mandarin and Cantonese, pronounce it along the lines of cha, but Hokkien and Teochew Chinese varieties along the southern coast of China pronounce it like te. These two pronunciations have made their separate ways into other languages around the world, starting in the early 17th century. The Dutch played a dominant role in the early European tea trade via the Dutch East India Company. The Dutch borrowed the word for tea from Min Chinese, either through trade directly from Hokkien speakers in Formosa where they had established a port, or from Malay traders in Bantam, Java. The Dutch then introduced to other European languages this Min pronunciation for tea, including English tea, French the, Spanish té, and German tea. This pronunciation is also the most common form worldwide. The cha pronunciation came from the Cantonese cha of Guangzhou and the ports of Hong Kong and Macau, which were also major points of contact, especially with the Portuguese traders who settled Macau in the 16th century. The Portuguese adopted the Cantonese pronunciation, cha, and spread it to India. However, the Korean and Japanese pronunciations of cha were not from Cantonese, but were borrowed into Korean and Japanese during earlier periods of Chinese history. A third form, the increasingly widespread chai, came from Persian che. Both the cha and che forms are found in Persian dictionaries. They are derived from the northern Chinese pronunciation of cha, which passed overland to Central Asia and Persia, where it picked up the Persian grammatical suffix u before passing on to Russian as, Arabic as, Urdu as che, Hindi as che, Turkish as shai, etc. The few exceptions of words for tea that do not fall into the three broad groups of te, cha, and chai are mostly from the minor languages from the botanical homeland of the tea plant from which the Chinese words for tea might have been borrowed originally. English has all three forms, cha or cha, attested from the 16th century, tea, from the 17th, and chai, from the 20th. However, the form chai refers specifically to a black tea mixed with honey, spices and milk in contemporary English. Origin and history. Tea plants are native to East Asia, and probably originated in the borderlands of North Burma and southwestern China. There appears to have been at least 3 separate domestication events of tea and possibly 4. Chinese-type tea may have originated in southern China, possibly with hybridization of unknown wild tea relatives. However, since there are no known wild populations of this tea, the precise location of its origin is speculative. Given their genetic differences forming distinct clades, Chinese Assam-type tea may have 2 different parentages, one being found in southern Yunnan and the other in western Yunnan. Many types of southern Yunnan Assam tea have been hybridized with the closely related species Camellia thaliensis, unlike southern Yunnan Assam tea. Western Yunnan Assam tea shares many genetic similarities with Indian Assam-type tea. Thus, Western Yunnan Assam tea and Indian Assam tea both may have originated from the same parent plant in the area where southwestern China, Indo-Burma, and Tibet meet. However, as the Indian Assam tea shares no haplotypes with Western Yunnan Assam tea, Indian Assam tea is likely to have originated from an independent domestication. Some Indian Assam tea appears to have hybridized with the species Camellia pubicosta, assuming a generation of 12 years. Chinese small leaf tea is estimated to have diverged from Assam tea around 22,000 years ago, while Chinese Assam tea and Indian Assam tea diverged 2,800 years ago. The divergence of Chinese small leaf tea and Assam tea would correspond to the last glacial maximum. Tea drinking may have begun in the Yunnan region during the Shang dynasty in China, when it was used for medicinal purposes. It is also believed that in Sichuan, people began to boil tea leaves for consumption into a concentrated liquid without the addition of other leaves or herbs, thereby using tea as a bitter yet stimulating drink, rather than as a medicinal concoction. Chinese legends attribute the invention of tea to the mythical Shennong in 2737 BC, although evidence suggests that tea drinking may have been introduced from the southwest of China. The earliest written records of tea come from China. The word tu appears in the Shijing and other ancient texts to signify a kind of bitter vegetable, and it is possible that it referred to a number of different plants such as sow thistle, chicory, or smartweed, as well as tea. In the Chronicles of Haoyang, it was recorded that the Ba people in Sichuan presented tu to the Zhou king. The state of Ba and its neighbor Shu were later conquered by the Qin. And according to the 17th century scholar Gu Yanwu, who wrote in Riji Lu, it was after the Qin had taken Shu that they learned how to drink tea. Another possible early reference to tea is found in a letter written by the Qin dynasty general Lu Kun, who requested that some real tea to be sent to him. The earliest known physical evidence of tea was discovered in 2016 in the mausoleum of Emperor Jing of Han in Xi'an, indicating that tea from the genus Camellia was drunk by Han Dynasty emperors as early as the 2nd century BC. The Han Dynasty work, The Contract for a Youth, written by Wang Bao in 59 BC, contains the first known reference to boiling tea. Among the tasks listed to be undertaken by the youth, the contract states that he shall boil tea and fill the utensils, and he shall buy tea at Wuyang. The first record of tea cultivation is also dated to this period, during which tea was cultivated on Meng Mountain near Chengdu. Another early credible record of tea drinking dates to the 3rd century AD. In a medical text by Hua Tuo, who stated, "To drink bitter tea constantly makes one think better." However, before the mid-8th century Tang dynasty, tea drinking was primarily a southern Chinese practice. It became widely popular during the Tang dynasty, when it was spread to Korea, Japan, and Vietnam. Through the centuries, a variety of techniques for processing tea, and a number of different forms of tea, were developed. During the Tang dynasty, tea was steamed, then pounded and shaped into cake form, while in the Song dynasty, loose-leaf tea was developed and became popular. During the Yuan and Ming dynasties, unoxidized tea leaves were first pan-fried, then rolled and dried, a process that stops the oxidation process that turns the leaves dark, thereby allowing tea to remain green. In the 15th century, oolong tea, in which the leaves were allowed to partially oxidize before pan-frying, was developed. Western tastes, however, favored the fully oxidized black tea, and the leaves were allowed to oxidize further. Yellow tea was an accidental discovery in the production of green tea during the Ming dynasty, when apparently sloppy practices allowed the leaves to turn yellow, but yielded a different flavor as a result. Tea was first introduced to Portuguese priests and merchants in China during the 16th century, at which time it was termed cha. The earliest European reference to tea, written as Chiai, came from Del Navigazione Viaggi written by a Venetian, Giambattista Ramusio, in 1545. The first recorded shipment of tea by a European nation was in 1607 when the Dutch East India Company moved a cargo of tea from Macau to Java. Then 2 years later, the Dutch bought the first assignment of tea, which was from Hirado in Japan, to be shipped to Europe. Tea became a fashionable drink in The Hague in the Netherlands, and the Dutch introduced the drink to Germany, France, and across the Atlantic to New Amsterdam. The first record of tea in English came from a letter written by Richard Wickham, who ran an East India Company office in Japan, writing to a merchant in Macau requesting the best sort of chaw in 1615. Peter Mundy, a traveller and merchant who came across tea in Fujian in 1637, wrote, "Cha, only water with a kind of herb boiled in it." Tea was sold in a coffee house in London in 1657, Samuel Pepys tasted tea in 1660, and Catherine of Braganza took the tea-drinking habit to the British court when she married Charles II in 1662. Tea, however, was not widely consumed in Britain until the 18th century, and remained expensive until the latter part of that period. British drinkers preferred to add sugar and milk to black tea, and black tea overtook green tea in popularity in the 1720s. Tea smuggling during the 18th century led to the general public being able to afford and consume tea. The British government removed the tax on tea, thereby eliminating the smuggling trade by 1785. In Britain and Ireland, tea was initially consumed as a luxury item on special occasions, such as religious festivals, wakes, and domestic work gatherings. The price of tea in Europe fell steadily during the 19th century, especially after Indian tea began to arrive in large quantities. By the late 19th century, tea had become an everyday beverage for all levels of society. The popularity of tea also informed a number of historical events. The Tea Act of 1773 provoked the Boston Tea Party that escalated into the American Revolution, and the need to address the issue of British trade deficit caused by the demand for Chinese tea led to a trade in opium that resulted in the Opium Wars. Chinese small-leaf type tea was introduced into India in 1836 by the British in an attempt to break the Chinese monopoly on tea. In 1841, Archibald Campbell brought seeds of Chinese tea from the Kumon region and experimented with planting tea in Darjeeling. The Aliobari Tea Garden was opened in 1856 and Darjeeling tea began to be produced. In 1848, Robert Fortune was sent by the East India Company on a mission to China to bring the tea plant back to Great Britain. He began his journey in high secrecy as his mission occurred in the lull between the Anglo-Chinese First Opium War and Second Opium War. The Chinese tea plants he brought back were introduced to the Himalayas, though most did not survive. The British had discovered that a different variety of tea was endemic to Assam and the northeast region of India, and that it was used by the local Singpho people, and these were then grown instead of the Chinese tea plant and then were subsequently hybridized with Chinese small-leaf type tea as well as likely closely related wild tea species, using the Chinese planting and cultivation techniques. The British launched a tea industry by offering land in Assam to any European who agreed to cultivate it for export. Tea was originally consumed only by Anglicized Indians. However, it became widely popular in India in the 1950s because of a successful advertising campaign by the India Tea Board. Cultivation and harvesting. Camellia sinensis is an evergreen plant that grows mainly in tropical and subtropical climates. Some varieties can also tolerate marine climates and are cultivated as far north as Cornwall in England, Perthshire in Scotland, Washington State in the United States, and Vancouver Island in Canada. In the Southern Hemisphere, tea is grown as far south as Hobart on the Australian island of Tasmania and Waikato in New Zealand. Tea plants are propagated from seed and cuttings. About 4 to 12 years are needed for a plant to bear seed and about 3 years before a new plant is ready for harvesting, in addition to a zonate climate or warmer. Tea plants require at least 127 centimeters of rainfall a year and prefer acidic soils. Many high-quality tea plants are cultivated at elevations of up to 1,500 meters above sea level. Though at these heights the plants grow more slowly, they acquire a better flavor. 2 principal varieties are used: Camellia sinensis var. Sinensis, which is used for most Chinese, Formosan and Japanese teas, and C. sinensis var. Assamica, used in pu'er and most Indian teas. Within these botanical varieties, many strains and modern clonal varieties are known. Leaf size is the chief criterion for the classification of tea plants, with 3 primary classifications being Assam type, characterized by the largest leaves; China type, characterized by the smallest leaves; and Cambodian type, characterized by leaves of intermediate size. The Cambodian type tea was originally considered a type of Assam tea. However, later genetic work showed that it is a hybrid between Chinese small leaf tea and Assam type tea. Darjeeling tea also appears to be hybrids between Chinese small leaf tea and Assam type tea. A tea plant will grow into a tree of up to 16 meters if left undisturbed. But cultivated plants are generally pruned to waist height for ease of plucking. Also, the short plants bear more new shoots which provide new and tender leaves and increase the quality of the tea. Only the top 1–2 inches of the mature plant are picked. These buds and leaves are called flushes. A plant will grow a new flush every 7 to 15 days during the growing season. Leaves that are slow in development tend to produce better flavored teas. Pests of tea include mosquito bugs of the genus Helopeltis that can tatter leaves, so they may be sprayed with insecticides. In addition, there may be Lepidoptera and leaf feeders and various tea diseases. Chemical composition. Caffeine constitutes about 3% of tea's dry weight, translating to between 30 mg and 90 mg per 8 ounces cup depending on type, brand, and brewing method. A study found that the caffeine content of 1 gram of black tea ranged from 22 to 28 mg, while the caffeine content of 1 gram of green tea ranged from 11 to 20 mg, reflecting a significant difference. The astringency in tea can be attributed to the presence of polyphenols. These are the most abundant compounds in tea leaves, making up 30–40% of their composition. Tea also contains small amounts of theobromine and theophylline, which are stimulants, and xanthines similar to caffeine. Because of modern environmental pollution, fluoride and aluminium also sometimes occur in tea. Certain types of brick tea made from old leaves and stems have the highest levels. Black and green teas contain no essential nutrients in significant amounts, with the exception of the dietary mineral manganese at 0.5 mg per cup or 26% of the daily value. Tea leaves contain diverse polyphenols, including flavonoids, epigallate, catechin gallate and other catechins. It has been suggested that green and black tea may protect against cancer or other diseases such as obesity or Alzheimer's disease, but the compounds found in green tea have not been conclusively demonstrated to have any effect on human diseases. One human study demonstrated that regular consumption of black tea over 4 weeks had no beneficial effect in lowering blood cholesterol levels. Physically speaking, tea has properties of both a solution and a suspension. It is a solution of all the water-soluble compounds that have been extracted from the tea leaves, such as the polyphenols and amino acids, but is a suspension when all of the insoluble components are considered, such as the cellulose in the tea leaves. Processing and classification. Tea is generally divided into categories based on how it is processed. At least 6 different types are produced. After picking, The leaves of C. sinensis soon begin to wilt and oxidize unless immediately dried. An enzymatic oxidation process triggered by the plant's intracellular enzymes causes the leaves to turn progressively darker as their chlorophyll breaks down and tannins are released. This darkening is stopped at a predetermined stage by heating, which deactivates the enzymes responsible. In the production of black teas, halting by heating is carried out simultaneously with drying. Without careful moisture and temperature control during manufacture and packaging, growth of undesired molds and bacteria may make tea unfit for consumption. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Would you like to know more?